Hello and welcome to this week's episode of It's All Blakademik with your host, myself, Jordan Jarrett-Bryan. And on this week's show, we're going to have a debate and discussion around the African diaspora heading back to their country of origins on the African continent. Just before I introduce my guests for this week's discussion, a quick reminder, once again, across all the socials, if you're not following us by now, please do so. We're across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching us right now, you're on the channel, you might as well subscribe to us. Click the button. It's the red one. Click it now, please. And finally, we're a podcast as well. So if podcasts are more your thing, go and download or find and download the Acast app. We're also on Spotify as well. Right, let's get into our discussion, guys. I'm joined this week on the panel by Kenneth Thorpe, the director of the Africa Centre. Thanks for joining us on the show this week. Elvina Quaison here has written about this subject extensively, I'm told, as well. And also Azu Wakachu here, who is a Nigerian, who I know you spend a lot of time going back and forth to Nigeria and here in the UK. Let me start with you, Kenneth. Before we get to the why many people are re-migrating back to the continent, tell us a little bit about the what, just for those that maybe don't know or weren't aware that this is happening. Tell us a little bit about what is happening and what has been happening in the last few years.
Look, I won't claim to be the expert at all on this, and I'm sure my colleagues will also have a really informed view. But there is definitely a movement. I mean, 2019 Ghana has described this year as the year of return. They're trying to encourage people to return and also people to invest. So there are a number of different examples across the continent where governments are really making a move to attract, if not people to return, but to attract diaspora investment. So it's about the link between the continent and the diaspora and how those two, what that relationship is. Remittance, the amount of money that diaspora people send back to their people in their home country is huge. The official amount and the informal amount is huge, which is why, you see a lot of companies trying to develop the latest app or something like that to make that happen, because it's huge. So there is always a relationship between the diaspora and the continent. I think right now it's at a particularly interesting stage of development.
And how long, do you know how long this has been happening for? Is this like the last year, the last 5 years that slowly more and more of the diaspora have been going back to the continent?
I'm not sure. I think perhaps what's changed, particularly in the last couple of years, is that it's become very much part of the conversation. It's something that it's not surprising people to hear these conversations, and I think it's very live as we see that the continent is developing so quickly. It's offering up new opportunities.
Yeah, I'm hearing. Elvina, so that's the what. Do you know why? Do you know why so many now are deciding they want to go back to their current country of origin on the continent?
Sure. Okay, so it's more attractive right now. And there's a lot more opportunity and it's more visible. So what you were seeing 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was this extremely unattractive Africa that people didn't want to be associated with, let alone actually want to return or go to for the first time. And a lot of the associations a lot of first, second generation diaspora had with their home country may not have been that positive because of the experience their parents had had, depending on what was their motivation to move. But as they started to see things, I think, I can't remember which World Cup because I don't follow football as perhaps I should, but there was the year where Ghana did particularly well, and it was, for the UK anyway, sort of their relationship with being more attracted to Africa. It was combined with, I think, Sway and Reggie Yates and a few other known Black British celebrities really celebrating their Africanness. And then Ghana was doing ridiculously well. Ghana. And so there was a lot of people really rooting. And this wasn't just Ghanaians. It was African diaspora and African Caribbean diaspora. And also English non-Black people were also really rooting and becoming more interested. Add to that, beginning to get a change and shift in the story. So now people are thinking about the investment. Kenneth mentioned $40 billion was remitted to Africa from diaspora last year.
Wow.
And that exceeds what we get from aid donors and so on and so forth. So it's like, how do we harness that? What do we do with that? And you're starting to get really interesting young entrepreneurs on the continent and in diaspora who are tapping into technology, platforms, relationships, starting to listen to what friends and family are doing and thinking, okay, let me go out there and investigate what my opportunities can be. So you're starting to see some very exciting things coming out of there. And yeah, the whole shift and approach of how we're beginning to see this new Africa, if you like, is having a real instigating force.
Azu, do you know anybody in the last? What are you laughing for?
It's just what she's been saying. I mean, Africa has always been there. The question is, did you want to know, or did the diaspora want to know? To go back, 2005, for example, when Afrobeats wasn't popping, nobody wanted to know. Now we have Afrobeats, and it's sort of
cool.
Fashionable and cool to be African. Then suddenly people are saying Africa has always been there. They've always been the technology, the dynamism, the enthusiasm, the aspiration. It has always been there.
So why is it now that people are deciding to go back to the continent?
I think now people are deciding to go back to the continent because, one, it's more fashionable. Two, I would say a lot of it has to do with the rise of Afrobeat. So people have now sort of found an identity they could be proud of.
It's got to be more than that, though. You're not going to leave Europe or America to go back to your country of origin just because the genre is getting really, really big.
No, but the reason that the thought process started in the first place was because now they're no longer ashamed/embarrassed to be African. Then now it's okay, what are we going back there to do? Let's invest and so on and so forth, which is good, but I would say there are risks attached to that. Yeah. And there are risks that for someone who didn't grow up in the continent, who doesn't understand the psyche of the continent, will not even understand or will not even have in their horizon. They will be completely blindsided.
Go.
So, okay, the Afrobeats, the perception, all of that is interesting. And yes, it's something that people can latch onto and be proud of. But what it also does is showcase that these are things that are happening on the continent. Whereas before we didn't see any of that. You didn't know any of that was going on. Nobody was really saying to you, you can go and do this and it can have levels of success. Or more importantly, really and truly, you can make a living out of this. You can actually be productive and be able to succeed based on these things. You're also getting more and more governments, as you said, supporting people to be able to go into business in varying African countries, Nigeria, Ghana. I mean, pretty much almost every African country is now opening a diaspora affairs office, department or desk, which means there is a place for you to go to who literally are going to assist you on your journey to varying levels of success and ability. But then there's organizations like the one I work with, Afford, where we also work with diaspora to help them set up their businesses and deal with a lot of these loopholes. Because let's not forget, it's a different world. It literally is a different world, different mindset, different challenges, and you do need help. But there is help there if you look for it and ask in the right places. And more importantly, be ready to pay and invest in your move so that you don't get burned like so many do when they just follow an idea or a whim.
I think what I'm hearing from both my colleagues here, and I think they're right, is that there has been a change in perception. And part of that change in perception, and what I've seen, is that there's been historically there's been a real lack of understanding through Western media about that really reflects a contemporary Africa as it is now. So many people are surprised by simple facts, by it's a young continent. That mobile technology, for example, is shaping and changing lives. Mobile banking is at least 5 to 10 years ahead on the continent. Most people are surprised by these things. So once they're starting to tune into the fact that it's not just, that Africa is a modern, contemporary, thriving environment with opportunity. It's making them reassess, what there might be for them.
So you use the word there's a misunderstanding. Maybe you're being polite. It's just a lie from the Western world about what, because I don't know if any of you've seen the series that Adesina did on BBC on Africa recently. Yeah. He's a regular on this show as well. That for me, as someone that doesn't know as much as I probably should about the continent, opened up my eyes to see how young and vibrant it currently is in certain African nations. Technology is growing, the economy is growing. It was the first time I'd seen it painted in an honest and balanced picture of what's really going on the continent.
Listen, this may seem like I'm going off subject. I'm not.
Go for it.
I went to see the UK premiere of a fantastic film, Rafiki. Okay. And this has been groundbreaking. It's a love story about two women. And it was banned by the Kenyan government. But the point being, the director of that film, Wanuri, amazing young woman, she was saying, the part of the problem is that as a female, as a director of African, from Africa, you're constantly told that the story you should be telling is that, And it's about all the bad things, all the challenges, and not about the joy, and not about the hope, and not about the good things that are happening. And so I think really, you know, for people who are working in the creative sector and people who make creative choices about the stories that are told, it's how we begin to tell our own stories, you know, and that give a more balanced view of what contemporary Africa is about. And I think that is what is changing gradually. And the other thing I was going to say, you know, that as we start this conversation was the idea of returning home. You know, if you, like me, are born in this country, but I'm half Nigerian, that's a different, the idea of returning home is more of a, you know, a philosophical returning
I get
home.
to that as well. Yeah.
Whereas some of my siblings who grew up in Nigeria, you know, but are living here in the UK, the idea of returning home is a different one, slightly differently nuanced one from them.
I hear that.
Because, you know, they spent their formative years growing up in Nigeria, you know. And I have one sister who still lives in Lagos. And of course, she's already there. But of course, my question to her would be, what would make you leave?
Yeah, I hear that. Well, does anybody know anyone that's in the last 5 to 10 years left Europe or America? You do?
Me.
You?
Yes.
And what's been the experience of being in Africa, someone that's spent a lot of time out of the continent?
Yeah, it's as I was saying it's a different world because it literally is. You have to shift.
Break it down, tell us.
Okay, so prime example. So when I went out there, it was like, I'm going to go and live my African dream. I went and I got a beautiful house, pink mango tree house, that's what I called it, in East Legon, which is a nice area of Accra. And I had a driver, I had a house help. Henry laughs at me about this, but you needed it because you don't have there's not public transport, and I didn't drive at the time. And electricity wasn't flowing as well as it isn't at the moment. So I didn't have like a washing machine, and I didn't have a Hoover, and I didn't have all of those things. So it sounds like luxury, but you actually do need that form of assistance. Coming from a country where you can do all that stuff yourself, you can look after yourself fully. You hardly have to interact with anybody, let alone people you may not even want to. Whereas in Ghana, it was completely different. I had to be open. I had to ask for help, receive help, be sharing of myself in a way that I did not have to do in the UK. So it was learning how to be and think in a very different way. The thing that everybody always says whenever they move is like, but people don't have common sense. People don't have common sense. And like, what you have to remember is common sense is environmentally and contextually grounded.
Yeah.
It makes sense in the country in which you're in. It might not make sense to you, but they've been living here throughout time, so they know why they're doing what they're doing. And you will learn that perhaps actually that is also why I have to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, as we were saying, the innovation, the imagination, the drive, the hustle, that was all and has been going on for time immemorial. We're only just starting to see and appreciate it now. And it definitely changed my outlook from how I was brought up in the UK. And you are in a nice, happy little bubble. NHS is there for you. Electricity isn't going to be switched off if you're not paying your bills. Water will flow, even if you've got no money. And that is not the case when I moved to Ghana and had to go through that growth and experience.
Okay, so a few things. Earlier you were talking about what was not being shown to us. If you were interested, you would look for yourself. That's the first point, so I sort of get into this conversation. You hear a lot of people saying, but you don't see that on TV. Well, it's not should I say Western media's job to enlighten you about Africa. They are going to tell their story from their perspective. So you have to look for your
responsibility on you to
find out what you know. What you want to know, sorry. So that's one aspect. And then you said you went back to East Legon. Funny enough, I was in East Legon in February, and the driver, the nice house, I can afford it. By the time I convert my pound sterling, I can get a nice penthouse with a swimming pool and a gym, but that is not the everyday life experience of somebody in Africa. So you going back to Africa, you're more or less, to an extent, and this might sound weird, almost like the colonial masters. Because you're coming to live a life of luxury. You're not living the day-to-day experience of a Ghanaian person.
Is that fair?
It's not fair. How's it a jump from I'm going to go and live a middle life, I'm going to go and live a middle-class lifestyle, to I'm going to go and be a colonial master? I
would explain. What did you say? You had a driver, a gardener, a this and a that and a that. You could get a car and drive in Ghana. You could go to the market and rub shoulders in the nitty-gritty, mucky streets and buy your foodstuff. But why do that? pay somebody to do it. You can afford to do
I'm
it.
sorry, so are you saying that there's no African middle class person
They are
living and born in that country? And I've been to Nigeria. So,
there are people there.
So you're saying
but what I'm saying is that you're going back to Africa, but from what you're living, you're not experiencing Africa. You're living like an expatriate.
I'm experiencing Africa. You just said yourself there's African middle class living that way.
But they know the streets.
That was my experience.
Yeah, they know the streets, back,
and they aren't living in the same way. So I'm not fully agreeing with the perception you're putting across.
In Nigeria, in as much as you might have money, in Africa generally, in as much as you might have money, you could be we don't really have a class system. Let me explain. Somebody could be, I don't know, broke, and you say, oh, he sounds so posh, he's middle class. It doesn't work like that in Nigeria. The richest man will speak pidgin, the poorest man will speak pidgin. So your class depends on how much you have. If your money goes up, you move into middle class. If it goes down, you drop. That is the way it works. There is no such thing as
I want to come back to you. The thing about the media, I think the point I was trying to make is, of course, we can each take our own personal responsibility for pursuing an area that we're interested in. But my point was, for people who are not actively seeking, who just are reliant on the stuff that we're fed from day to day, if the general image that you're fed is of war-torn, poverty, this is why the whole conversation about poverty porn has become, and the white savior thing has become so potent at the moment, because there is another story. There are other stories of Africa which are not reaching. So if Western media is telling one story predominantly again and again, then those people who are not motivated enough to see beyond that will, of course, they're not even motivated to do that, because they immediately just put that in a place over there. So it's a balance of things. So it's not one or the other. I'm not saying it's just about the media's responsibility, but that plays a big part in perception. So I think,
I just say on the media thing, sort of two ways. So in terms of representation, you've got things like An African City, which has really helped to change people's mindsets. And there's other web-based series that are doing that. And okay, so the Western society has its ability and space to put across its perspective. But equally, our own countries and our own media don't do very much in terms of putting across the good news from their own country. They're doing slightly more now. But for those who are motivated and do watch the ABNs and the Ben TVs and read their papers online, the stories there aren't hugely popular or positive either. And that's even for the person who is trying to see. Also, sorry, and I will stop. But even sometimes from your own family, both in country and beyond, who you ask, what's going on at home? Oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other, our government. So we also need to be ambassadors for our own countries.
Perpetuate the negativity yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, true. But I was going to come on to that next point, because like you said, you're going back to live your African dream. But you have that perception because you lived in the West and you want to have that pride in your Africanness. Should I put it that way?
Sure.
An African person in Africa doesn't have that problem. He wakes up, he sees African people all day. So that sort of pride in Africa.
So are you saying that if you're going to go back to your country of origin, you need to assimilate and live like the people, even if you can afford to live a different lifestyle? If you're going to go to Africa, live their way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What I mean is, if you want to be in Africa, live in Africa, not just physically, but in, should I say, mind, body, and spirit. What do I mean by that? I'm not having a go at you, and by all means, of course, if you have the money, enjoy your money, But if you've not lived in a country before, and for example, when I go on holidays, I don't want to go on a holiday and sit in a resort for 1 week and then fly back and say, oh, I was in Spain. No, I want to walk on the streets of Spain. I want to meet the people of Spain.
Immerse yourself in the culture. The country,
and if you have a driver going to do your shopping and all that stuff, then you're going to be at home watching, satellite TV, and you're not.
Your assumptions are huge and overwhelming.
Yeah, driver, cleaner.
Can you not do both?
Driver, cleaner, mopper.
Exactly.
Can you not have the money and live the life that your money?
So do you not have any of those when you live in Nigeria? And actually, we're missing the point. That's not even the point.
Yeah.
The point is that you can go and you can move, which many people are doing, because yes, you do want a better lifestyle. You do want more opportunities for your children, because you will see that people's attitudes to education, their attitudes to excelling is stronger in a lot of African and Caribbean countries than what we're currently experiencing here.
True.
And so people are thinking, actually, I don't want to deal with the racism anymore. I don't want to deal with the glass ceiling anymore. I want to go to a place where there's much more opportunity, and I'm going to go and try and do that. And also the idea that you were saying something about the person wakes up African and just is like, I don't need to find pride. I'm just born with it. I would definitely question, because there is more work that does need to do about people within some people, let me be very clear, within Africa, seeing the amazingness that is there and not wanting to move and find it elsewhere. Because if they were like great, then you wouldn't see people.
Trust me, when Africans move from Africa to the West, they move strictly for economic reasons. I'm sure children who have been born in this country, they still go to African parties, and the African culture, music, dancing, food doesn't change.
So let me move on a little bit now to how people are received by the people that have grown up in Ghana, Nigeria, and these other African countries. I'll ask all three of you. Is there a tension from those that come from the West that come back to their African nation, almost a resentment that you come here with your money and your Western mindset? Is there an issue from their perspective? How do they receive you? Or any of you three? Actually.
Okay, I'll tell you, because it's funny, because it all depends. It all depends on how you carry yourself. If you come across with your arrogance, trust me, they will straighten you out very quickly. Trust me, that would happen, So I'll give you a little story. I went with a friend of mine to Nigeria, and we were staying in a gated community. Yes, I know. They had security guards and whatnot. And I said to my friend, in as much as they have security men at the gate, it is important for them to like you, because there's nothing as important as street knowledge. They will give you the little hints and tips when you're going out and what to be careful
where to go, where not to go.
So I said, let's go and have a chat with them. So we went there and sat down with them in their little hut. We just had a chat. We're talking about Nigeria. And my friend who grew up here in the West, he said, when we left, that was a really good move, because he noticed the way they opened up, because they saw it as you rich guys or whatever coming down to us to sort of, interact with us, as opposed to keep your distance as if, I'm better than kind of mindset. So their mood changed. Whenever they saw us more as friends. And that is what I wanted, because I wanted them to tell you, it's a bit, the streets are a bit hot.
Sure.
Stay home.
Yeah. What's your experience been when you've been back to Nigeria or any African nation?
What I'm saying is when I was much, much younger. I think my first visit to Nigeria was an interesting one. I went for a big family occasion. And I had two parallel experiences, and I'll try and tell it really quickly. On the one hand, of course, being paler skinned, Oyinbo, and it took me a while it's taken me a while to understand that actually that is really, I think, more as a descriptor, not necessarily meant with as a pejorative. But of course, to be on the receiving end of it, it immediately put me in that other place.
Sure.
When I'm saying, no, hang on, I'm family. At the same time, if you stood me side by side with my late father, but despite me being paler skinned, we're so similar that I had people at the same time coming up to me who I'd never met before in my life. And they'd take one look at me as, we know who you are. You're son of Esiroshu, we know who you are. So on the one hand, I was being held as with one hand as another. And the other hand, I was being braced as family. And I suppose I've come to just accept that, even as one person at any one moment, you're maybe dealing with two different realities at the same time.
I hear that. And to build on my question there, somebody mentioned that, I think it was you that mentioned people may want to go back to their country of origin because they don't want to suffer the racism that they may suffer in America or Europe. But is there a different type of prejudice that comes just because we're the same skin color? There's a different kind of frustration or annoyance or tension that comes from being an outsider, or is that not?
I mean, there's
fair?
There's definitely a different. You're perceived differently because you are different. I mean, for you, you have this whole idea of saying, be it philosophical or imagine that you're going home and to think that it's going to be all this embracing and all of that fabulousness. But that's not likely to really happen. Okay. It is going to be a case of I mean, there's a relationship there, right? You have had in different spaces, and you have had different people from the West, be they black, white, what have you, coming with this idea, what they call in Ghana, to know. That we've been in the West, we know, we've got knowledge to bring, we've got skills, we're going to come and teach and help you. And people are like, I don't need your help, I pretty much know what I'm doing. So chill. And then exactly, and then we can see where you can fit in and so on. And then also there's the case where people have gone and left and gone and left. So also sometimes people just sit back and watching, how long is this one going to last? So this is what I was saying about that common sense thing. You go and you be like, I came to come and get a job and I've got all of these skills and they didn't even take me seriously. You were not the first. You're probably like the 20th.
That's the colonization mentality I was talking about. Because they're turning up with an entitlement, you know. And
we've come to save you and help you.
And they're like, no, thank you, I'm fine. You know, this is the thing. And again, you have people who have been in the country. Don't forget, there are universities in these countries. They have graduates. There are people who are, you know, they are a society. I don't know what people think. You know, that's why I said Africa has always been there. It's depending on if you wanted to know. It's been there and it's been doing fine.
Let me just ask you guys, Ghana is probably seen as the main country in Africa that seems to be thriving, and many are going back, as you mentioned at the start. What are the other nations in Africa that are on the rise economically, socially, or in any aspect? What other nations are you seeing people going back to slowly but surely?
I mean, I'm Nigerian, so I would say Nigeria, but that's because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the biggest economy in Africa now, or something along those lines. I can't, but it's one of the thriving economies. On the other hand, Ghana, right now, in all honesty, they seem to having A, very good PR, and B, I think they found oil in Ghana. And never mind that there's the little teeny bitty rivalry between Nigeria and Ghana, but I will give them their dues. They do have good PR right now. And then the president who declared 2019 the year of the return, it's all nice PR and stuff. But this is my thing with African governments, is that they always find a way to let themselves and their people down. Now, there was a law passed in Ghana in the year 2000 or something like that about giving visas or something to diasporas who want to come back.
I was going to ask that.
For wherever they came from. The first person who got the visa was Bob Marley's wife 14 years later. So that just shows you a law is passed and it doesn't 14 years later. That is not, you know, the other than the big announcement, the background boring work hardly gets done in African countries. And that is where they come out and they get all the good PR, but then the work behind it falls short and then people give up. So now, if you go to start a business, you have all these laws and all these taxes you're supposed to pay and registrations you're supposed to make, but people don't do it because whatever.
So I would say that Rwanda, and actually counters a lot of these points. It's starting to be seen as a kind of a interesting case. So they've got their structures. They're focusing on being the conference hub for Africa, and they're also looking at ICT, as is Kenya as well. Both of those are looking at being key. I don't want to say the Silicon Valleys of Africa, because we can have our own spaces without comparison, but they're putting a lot of attention and energies into that. And Rwanda, apparently you can register your business within 48 hours. They've got a whole system in place. A lot of it is now you can able to do it online. So some really good stories are coming in that side of things, in the business side of things, is coming out of Rwanda. So yes, Rwanda, Kenya is also interesting. Ethiopia is also escalating and is another one to watch country.
I've just got to wrap over. Two quick questions to all of you guys. Would any of you guys go back to your country of origin for good? Are you planning, is your mindset of eventually I'm going to go back to my country of origin? And second, let's finish on a positive. What are the best things about going back to the continent and your country of origin? I'll start with you, Kenneth.
For me, that's a challenging question because I'm British born. So in a way, this is my country of origin. But of course, I'm being half Nigerian. I feel an affiliation to both. Talking to my siblings in the last couple of days about this question, the thing that would make them not go back are still the things to do with everyday infrastructure, power, electricity, water, the things that we take for granted here. those are some of the things that they would make them pause. But one of my younger sisters lives in Dublin, and as a family member with 3 young children, she's concerned about the rise in populism and nationalism. And although it's not necessarily impacting them yet, I think it's something that she's keeping a careful eye on.
Sure.
And Europe, this country, things are in flux at the moment, and I think there may be. So I guess what I'm saying in a rather long-winded way is there may be also reasons here that people go back not just because they want to be there, but they don't want to be here.
Yeah.
That's also something that could change the dynamic.
I hear that. Yourself, would you go back for good? And what are the best things about going back?
Okay. I describe myself as a bouncer. So I will definitely be between here and Ghana. And also what other diaspora are doing is actually going to other countries, not always just one of your heritage, but another country of interest. Nigeria is great for a bit of surge of energy, and then go back to Ghana to kind of and then the thing I miss most, actually, funny enough, I sort of was saying at the beginning, we're used to being kind of isolated or individualistic. The one thing I missed when I got back to the UK was that nobody would say hello to me. Like, the person in the shop used to recognize me, the person down the road. I got greeted and seen a lot during the day. Over here, there was nothing. And I actually do miss that. So that connectivity. Yeah.
Love that. And yourself, Ozzy, finally?
Okay, I've had this conversation, and I would say personally for me, I would, I would straddle both continents. So I'm not going to be here nor there, but I'm going to keep massive footprints, if you like, in both places, simply because I'm not going to say the UK is all bad. They are, like I said, the rise in populism. If you're a professional, the glass ceilings that you always come across after a while, so those things will make you want to, to give up, so to speak, and look for somewhere where you're more accepted. But at the same time, you're not going to deny that the insecurity, power, and the things he's mentioned are a problem. So it's about finding a balance. And for Black British people, I think you have it good, really, because with your passports, Europe is pending on Brexit. Europe is your it's your playground. With your African passport, West Africa is your playground. So you're probably traveling a large part of the world visa-free. So, that is one thing. And then that's one. Two, going back depending. If I have, enough investments and things that I can fall back on, then I will spend a lot more time there, especially the winters. Yeah.
I'm going to Africa next year for the very first time. I'm going to Ghana, and I can't wait. So I'm looking forward to my first experience of Africa. Azu, Elvina, and Kenneth, thanks for joining me on this week's podcast. I appreciate your time. Socials, once again, do not forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Subscribe to this channel as well. And as I mentioned at the start, there we're a podcast too. So if podcasts are more your thing, find us via the Acast app and also on Spotify too. Until next week, peace.